Recently, I'm realizing the importance of accepting what is. I think when we don't allow ourselves the certain liberty of a free thought or freedom of thought, we lose a lot of our potential in what we're actually able to achieve within any given moment. And I think that's because we're constantly telling ourselves certain things about the moment and painting the moment with those certain things that we tell ourselves. And I think sometimes we don't recognize that what we tell ourselves actually matters. Like what we tell ourselves actually sticks. And I think it's important to sort of fill your mind up and fill your identity up with certain things that sort of allow you to exist in the present. And I think I wouldn't say that's necessarily something I lost sight of, but it's something I gained sight of recently. That oftentimes our minds are sort of tuned to abstractions, like they're tuned to look at things that don't necessarily pertain to our goals and think things that don't necessarily pertain to our goals, just in essence of us just being. And what I mean by that is we don't really pat ourselves on the back for where we are. We don't give ourselves the affirmation necessary in order to be where we are and love where we are and love who we are where we are. I think that's really the thing that gives us some sort of validity in the moment, some sort of ability to be within the moment, is how much we allow ourselves to continue to persist in being ourselves regardless of how certain things look, regardless of how certain people say this or certain sounds or certain characteristics or certain distinctions. It's about how much of yourself is consistent. And when I say how much of yourself is consistent, I'm really recognizing that the consistent parts of ourselves are the things we consistently affirm. Like consistently telling ourselves that we can't do this if this is happening. And what that means to me is telling ourselves that we can't do a certain action because of some other thing. When oftentimes that's just a thought that we have, a relationship that we have to our thoughts about certain things. And I think it's about really acknowledging these relationships. And it's something I think I'm navigating even more heavily now. And I don't necessarily know if I fully grasp it or fully understand it, but I thought it was worth talking about because I don't think we can realize what lies in the future without recognizing what is currently here. And I think we never really give ourselves a perspective that allows us to be currently here. We don't give ourselves a perspective often enough to affirm ourselves enough where we are to walk the path, to get to where we're going or leave anything behind. And we hold so firmly onto the things that make us feel like right now, so firmly onto the ideas that sort of exist in the moment. And that's what I think our moments or eras or periods are shaped by. It's about what thoughts we hold most fervently in our head. And I was doing some reflecting on my mentality going into the previous year. And I remember writing about the idea that, we really just need to base our happiness on, in essence, of us being alive. Like I was happy to just be able to make it to the new year. And I think we need to bring that into like just being happy to make it into the new day. I think sometimes we get so caught up in the things that we do and how we attach certain feelings and emotions to the things that we're not able to do because of those things that we jeopardize the entire process. And I think part of the process is being able to be where you are. Part of the process is being able to be who you are. And loving that who you are isn't necessarily something I think that comes with difficulty. It just comes with our overall acceptance and ability to be where we are and not reference our appreciation for ourselves and what we're doing in any given moment. And of course, that's easier said than done to a certain extent, but I think it's very important because why should certain things have to line up in a certain way for you to feel aligned with yourself? If your alignment with yourself is only characteristics of the thoughts that you have about yourself. And if we can recognize it's always an internal thing with us, then we have to be able to recognize what things contribute to the internal, or more so, what we allow to contribute to our internal. And I think a lot of times we allow certain things to contribute when they really have no stake on who we are. I think the thing that should have the most stake on who we are is us. It should be about our focus, our intention, our ability to be present with what we do. So much so that we don't forget that we're the one doing it. So much so that we don't forget to experience who we are in everything we do. And I think, of course, there are times where I think we need to give ourselves a certain amount of space and freedom and silence to actually gather our thoughts, to gather some type of present imagery, some type of present realization, reflection, some type of viewpoint, some point in time where we can recognize what we're thinking at any given moment. And I think that moment doesn't necessarily have to be when you're sitting still. I don't think meditation is just about sitting still. It's about finding yourself in what you're doing. It's about not occupying yourself so much with the action that you forget yourself. And I think that's where self-love truly comes in, and the benefit of it really comes in, because when we don't make our entire objective about the objective itself, it becomes about doing. It becomes about the person doing it rather than the actual pursuit or acquisition of anything. And, if we're only focused on the outcome, then the whole path will sort of seem just like a means to an end. And I think it's not really supposed to be about feeling like a means to an end, but a constant progression of beginnings. Like you're beginning this moment right now when you're constantly etching into what is known as the future. And I think until we give ourselves appreciation where we are, we won't really find it in the future, because it's always about the perspective that we currently have and how we allow that to bleed into what is. I'm recognizing more so with my feelings that oftentimes we give into feelings in unknown ways, and we think that we're not the ones who really give into them. It may manifest as a thought or it may manifest as a feeling, but that feeling always has a spark or a trigger with something. And until we recognize why we're triggered by certain things and being able to discern that we shouldn't be triggered by those things, then we're always going to be sort of pulled along by this mysterious puppet master in a way. But the whole time it's really just us. It's really just our relationship to ourselves and our ideas about what is, and our ideas about who we are within any given moment, and making everything so dependent on a certain structure, a certain way of being, a certain cycle. And I think it's our need for that sort of space that takes us away from it, because we need to have a certain amount of space to do this. We need to have a certain amount of space to be who we are, but we're already taking up space. We're already where we are, and it really isn't about how anything else really looks, And I guess this really isn't even about the acquisition or our goals or anything about like that. It's about life itself. It's about learning to live life from where you are, not where you're going. And in that way, you free yourself from where you're going. Free yourself from the anxieties and preconceived notions that you may be projecting onto what may be based on your desire for it not to be a certain way. And I've always thought that, it's sort of stupid to project into the future and try to predict something, especially if it's negative. Because we have no idea what goes on in the future. And the only opportunity we get to carve that out is within the present moment, both through our preparation and through our presence with whatever it is that we're doing. And I think it's also about not putting our thoughts on such a linear time scale. I think time doesn't exist, but growth does. I think we do grow. And I think constantly referencing our growth to certain periods of times and feeling obligated to change in reference to certain times takes away from our ability to actually change. Because then the change becomes about, oh, I must have changed because this amount of time has passed, or I need to change because this amount of time has passed, instead of I need to change because of something that needs to change within me. I need to change for this reason. I need to change for that reason. I need to change so I can be more comfortable in who I am, more loving of who I am. So it's easier to love myself. Not to say that you have to do certain things or fit a certain standard to love yourself, but to say that self-love becomes easy when you do self-love, when you practice it, when you actually express yourself in a self-loving way. And I think sometimes doing actions that are unbefitting or thinking thoughts that aren't necessarily contributing to who we are takes away from our ability to actually love ourselves in the present moment, because it doesn't become about finding love or finding a way to be present or finding a way to understand ourselves or understand the world around us. Instead, it becomes about all the melodrama captured within our understanding of what is. And what I mean by that is we get so fixed on a certain way of looking at things that we forget that other possibilities exist, that we can be a million different ways, that we can always give ourselves another opportunity to be different in a way. And when I say be different, I don't necessarily mean changing all of your character, but recognizing that your character was never one set way to begin with. We're allowed to be flawed in a way, and we're allowed to perfect our flaws. we're allowed to sort of alter and change and give ourselves an opportunity to do that. And there's nothing that can truly stop us but ourselves. And I think it's the way that we think about our growth and the way that we think about our change that stops it. Because we sort of sit right in front of the doors to our change. We sit right in front of everything that we do, and we don't recognize that we're sitting in front of ourselves. We don't recognize that we're sort of constantly looking at ourselves and waiting on ourselves to exhibit certain actions so we can tell ourselves certain things. But we're always the one exhibiting the action. It's like waiting on yourself to tell yourself you love yourself so you can feel loved. But you're waiting on the action instead of giving yourself the love enough to tell yourself in the first place. It's about, I don't know, I feel like that was good. I feel like it's really just about, not waiting. Not waiting on life to happen, not waiting on yourself to feel this way, but acting in accordance to that feeling, acting in accordance to that, or feeling in accordance to that. I think another thing is that I don't really talk about is I think that we can feel intentionally. I think we can choose how we feel to a subtle extent, at least when we're present enough to do so. Like when I'm present, I can think of what a happiness feels like. I can imagine that I can raise myself to the level of a happy feeling. I can bring that incitement into my viewpoint. I can look outside and say, ooh, that's beautiful. And I'm happy that I get to exist right now. I'm happy that I'm alive. And it's just something I say to myself. But it's not like I'm just saying that to no end. I'm saying that because of the feeling it provides, because I'm acknowledging something that allows me to exist in a relative comfort in where I am. And if we don't allow ourselves to exist in a relative comfort of where we are, then we're always going to be stuck in where we aren't. And that really just goes back to the start of the video. You know, I think the objective isn't really to have an objective. I think the objective is to have no objective. It's to be where we are and content where we are, regardless of what we do. And of course, this is not necessarily an easy thing. And I don't necessarily even know how it applies to everything regards to mental health, but I know it applies because I know I understand to a subtle extent. I know that what I've said in this video has helped me to a subtle extent understand what needs to be done. And I think a lot of people maybe resonate with this idea, resonate with stuff like this because it's not inherent to one person. I think anyone with awareness that comes back onto themselves, anyone with any identity, can sympathize with the idea that we wait on ourselves more than anything by waiting on other people, by waiting on certain circumstances, by waiting on certain things to line up in order for us to feel in line. All that to say thank you. I really do appreciate each and every one of you, and I hope you guys are taking care of yourself and doing what you can with what you have. There's a lot more on the way, a lot already here, and I hope you guys are here for it. So thank you again, and yeah.